And just want to warn you, this episode contains explicit language.
Be open to opportunities. And if the door is even cracked, take a look at what's going on the other side of the door. You know, I had like I talk about having this hick inferiority complex when I got to Seattle, you know. And, you know, I read books and stuff, and I wasn't a complete hick, but, you know, I knew where I came from, you know. And I thought that everyone that was in Seattle knew something that I didn't know. And I thought that there was some secret, there was like a secret handshake or something that I just was never going to learn. And there's not.
All right, welcome to The Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody.
And we're excited today. We have Mike Squires. He's the host of the Riffs podcast. He's also a musician, a well-known guitarist, and we're so happy to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. What's going on? You looks like you had a war injury with your left shoulder over
there. Yeah, that's the microphone going in and out of my image with this odd green screen type contraption thing I have. So, yeah. So, tell us a little bit about what you do now, and then we'll go back to the beginning of your story and kind of go through your path.
I have this accidental podcast. It's purely I hear stories like this all the time. Like, oh, I was doing this thing, and then now here I am doing this. And that's pretty much how I came to have a podcast.
Nice.
I never wanted one. And sometimes I still don't. Yeah. But it's something that I love to. You'll find out over the course of the next however many minutes we talk that, you know, I don't mind talking.
Oh yeah. Well, it's one of those weird things with podcasts. Sometimes you love them, sometimes doing one, sometimes you love them, sometimes you hate them, right?
There are a lot of components. Scheduling is a huge pain in the butt. Sometimes I'm scheduled a month out. Sometimes I have podcast episodes, you know, banked 2 weeks out. And sometimes I'm recording and editing at midnight for publishing the next day. So,
well, we'll for sure get into your podcast, but why don't you take us back to how you first got into music and kind of start going down your path?
Okay. I think as a kid, we moved a lot. I lived with my mom. My dad wasn't around, and we moved. I went to like 13 grade schools. So we moved a lot. And from the 5th grade on, I was at one school. So that's a lot of moving during those years. And the last thing to get packed up and the first thing to get unpacked was always the stereo. So there was always music happening in my house, and no matter what kind of chaos was happening, it was always there, you know. And it was music. It was good music. My mom was into the good stuff. She was into Fleetwood Mac. She was into Boss Skaggs. You know, she took me to see Boss Skaggs when I was a kid. I saw Bob Seger when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
So seeing shows and hearing music all the time was really grounding, you know. Mm-hmm. So
this is around 5th grade, or is this before?
Oh, this is my whole life, buddy. This is from the time I could walk, you know.
Okay.
But in the 4th grade, that's when they give kids the opportunity to join the school band. And, you know, when you're in the lower grades, you see the older kids and you go and see the concert and you're like, it's kind of a racket, it doesn't really sound great, but look at what they're doing. Like they're making the sound all together. And so going into the 4th grade, I begged my mom to let me play the trumpet. And, we were on food stamps and welfare. She couldn't buy me an instrument. She couldn't even rent me one. But the school program, they had loaners. So I was able to, get my foot in the door with music.
Wow.
And that was music for me for a long time. I was in the school band up until I got a guitar, but I always kind of knew that rock music was going to be a big part of my future.
And so how long was it in the time between starting the trumpet and picking up the guitar?
I started playing trumpet in 4th grade, and I got my first guitar. Well, hell. It's a funny story. I had an uncle who, once we settled up in Washington, we lived in rural Washington in a little tiny town called Granite Falls. It's like it's not a logging town anymore, but it was a logging town then. There was a mill, and the people that were really ambitious got a job at Bayliner, or if you were really lucky, you got on at Boeing and just grind it out and live an American life, and that none of that crap ever appealed to me. I knew that was not for me. But I had an uncle who played the drums, and it's his birthday today, actually.
Oh, wow.
So I'll give him a little shout out to my Uncle Chris. He was a drummer back then. He was never very good, but he really, he would play. I could wake him up in the middle of the night, say, let's jam. And he would be like, let's go. Like he was always ready to go, And so he worked at Bayliner, and he cut his finger off at work and got a settlement and loaned my mom money to buy me a guitar and amp.
Wow.
And so, his misfortune became, a thing that bonded the two of us, playing music out in this little tiny camper trailer that was gutted and converted into a practice space behind the double wide where we all lived.
Nice. And I love that image of the gutted out camper as a place to play music.
Man, I have a photo of it somewhere, and I contemplated sending that one, but I don't think that photo was really the genesis. That same uncle, his record collection, I dove into, 110%. And it was, I don't know if it was the nature of the music or the nature of the alphabet, but my first love was AC/DC, and remains. I have a Angus Young tattoo. I love AC/DC, and when I was a kid, I had look at that. I made that before I played Trump. I was in the 2nd grade, maybe third grade. Play-Doh action figures, AC/DC action figures. You can see there's like over there on the side, there's like some choose your own adventure books that I kept on the thing. That little thing in the back was supposed to be a backdrop that said AC/DC that I used magic markers and made it,
Yeah,
And,
I love you even have the hat.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So that's an indicator right there. So that's not to get too nerdy, but to a kid, the singer had the hat on, and that's a Brian Johnson thing.
Yep.
So this is pre For Those About to Rock and post Back in Black. So the only photos you could see of people back then were on the album covers, or on the sleeves or whatever. So that was the was the basis for them. They all have very thick legs, these guys. That drummer is growing some giant mushrooms, but you can tell they're AC/DC because it says AC/DC.
Impressive. I don't think I would have been able to do that. I'm not that creative.
Well, we lived way far out of town. So, and, a quarter mile up a bumpy ass gravel road. There weren't other kids around. I had cousins that were around, and this is what you do. You do this, you read, you go out and skip rocks. I spent a lot of time skipping rocks. I can skip the shit out of a rock. No.
Well, it makes me wonder, you said your mom was into things like Boz Scaggs and Fleetwood Mac, and then your uncle obviously has some, quote, harder taste.
Oh, yeah.
How did that influence you?
The rock music?
Yeah. Or I guess the combination.
Well, it didn't make, when you're a kid, none of that stuff really makes a lot of sense. You're just like, it's all music, right? My mom also listened to a bunch of like outlaw country. She's a big Willie Nelson fan, a Merle Haggard fan, but all of it, she's just into all of it. We listen to Crystal Gale and Linda Ronstadt and Dolly Parton. And she never went for really the hard stuff. I think probably the hardest stuff we ever had around the house in her record collection was like Steve Miller,
Space Cowboy.
She had the Joker album, and I loved the cover of that album. It was so cool. I love that it looked like he had a Spider-Man mask or something.
Yeah. So it sounds like even if the music wasn't that hard, though, she tended to be drawn to the kind of rebellious characters.
Oh, was my mom attracted to rebellious characters? Yeah.
So
she married a couple of convicts. Yeah, she was very into bad boys.
So the Willies and the Whalens and those types. Yeah. So is your guitar playing casual at this point, or are you already at the time that you're picking it up after the trumpet? How does that go? Is it a serious endeavor, or is it something you're kind of messing around?
When I was a kid, before I even got a trumpet, I told my mom, ironically, the first part couldn't be further from the truth, but it seemed like the kind of thing that you would want to do if you were really poor. I said, I'm going to be a doctor, and then during the week, so that we can always have some money, and then I'm going to be a rock and roller on the weekend. And so I just didn't care about school enough to be a doctor. It's a lot of school, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but I got my first guitar and just punished my friends over the phone. I would go home, sit in my room and practice for 6 hours a day. I would wake up in the morning and I would practice and just try, this is 1987. There's not an internet. There are magazines that have tablature, and that's it. And then there's just like sitting next to your cassette deck or your record player and rewinding and trying to figure out, like, translating a sound you hear coming through a speaker and trying to decipher like all of the things that are coming through. Because there's no, you can't just go on YouTube then and there's no like isolated tracks. There's no, you can't even watch a band live unless there's a live concert VHS or something that you can copy from one of your friends at school. You're just like trying to decipher like which guitar part is one guitar, which is the one guitar line and which is the other. A lot of times they just feel like one really busy thing to an untrained ear.
And are you trying to learn it on AC/DC while you're developing your skills, or
I learned a lot of AC/DC songs for sure, but it was the 80s. And so I was just like, I was really impressionable. And I was like, oh man, I just want to know how to do the really fancy, flashy stuff because it appealed to me. You know, it was just like it was kind of like any shiny thing. It was like the slam dunk. It was the 60-yard field goal. It was the, you know, that was it. So I tried very hard to do that kind of thing, and sort of for a minute aspired as a kid to go to GIT, which is a music school in Hollywood. But I never had it. Still, I don't. I mean, now I'm old and arthritic and like, I mean, I recorded my part of a music performance out in the 35-degree weather last night. And I was just like, man, I'm getting too old for this shit.
I can relate to that. And so, are there any names of bands that you or artists that you can remember that you were trying to learn?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, as a kid, before I played guitar, it like the first two bands that really mattered to me were AC/DC and Kiss. Those were bands that felt like my bands. You know, they weren't my mom's music, and they were my uncle's music, but he was only a few years older than me, you know, or he was 10 years older than me. But for an uncle, that's not much.
Yeah.
So those were the two bands that really made an impression on me. They had the coolest album covers. They had the best lyrics, the shit, you know, stuff that I didn't understand as a kid, but I knew that I wanted to.
Sure.
I wanted to understand what they were talking about. So by the time I started playing, I hadn't lost interest in those bands by any stretch. But I was into like, there were, you know, Steve Vai, you know, is still the king of shred guitar.
Sure.
I was into Paul Gilbert, who I've been fortunate enough to have as a guest on my podcast, which is amazing. And George Lynch of Dokken, I'm a huge fan. You know, I'd love to get him on the podcast. But yeah, but more shred guys. Warren DeMartini, I still love his playing. I think he's great. And you can, I think that you can hear. You know, I'm a huge Eddie Van Halen fan, but that was the kind of thing that seemed like jazz to me. Like he's speaking another language, so I never tried to learn his solos because they didn't seem real.
And
it seemed like alien language.
It was very groundbreaking for sure.
Oh, dude.
And so I'm trying to imagine, you talked about, I forgot the word you used, but you said you were basically bothering your friends. When did you start knowing you were getting better?
Yeah, so I would learn a song, you know, and I'd get so excited. I'd call them on the phone and stick the phone down by the crappy speaker on my amplifier and just listen to this. And they'd be like, what is it? I'm like, aren't you even listening? You know, but I think, and still to this day, when you create something, there's that thing where you're like, I'm really doing it. But there's also that voice that's saying to you, like, are you though? You might want to double check your work before you turn it in.
Well, it's subjective, right? So it's hard to tell.
Yeah. I remember, and I've talked about this on my podcast where I've told people I got so excited when I heard how records were made. You know, people record different parts at different times. Sometimes it's not just like live. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. Multi-track tape recording. And we had like, you know, 2 boom boxes. And so I thought I was really onto something. Turns out every kid who's ever had 2 boom boxes and a guitar does this. You record into, using the built-in microphone, and then play it back and record that while you play along on another boom box. That's what a poor kid does if you don't have a 4-track. And yeah,
And
I would play those cassettes for my friends, and they would basically throw them out the window. Yeah.
So were you playing any shows in high school, or?
I mean, I eventually, my senior year of high school, I joined the school band again, and they let me join the school band if I would play trumpet in concerts. That was the sort of, that was the caveat. But I was like, I'm not gonna do that. I maybe did a couple of things, but mostly I played guitar at the basketball games, which was great. We would just, it was me and a drummer kid, this guy Ryan, who was great. And we would play, I mean, we did Hop for Teacher. We thought that was a real hoot. We thought that was funny.
That is funny.
And a bunch of other songs that were, popular at the time, rock songs that we liked.
Well, did you do the vocal intro where they're talking about the teacher?
Whoa!
Yeah.
No, it was an instrumental, like late night.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think they would have. I think we would have been reprimanded for that, probably. I don't think anyone was hip to what we were doing anyway. They probably thought that it, the teachers at least, they probably thought we wrote it. I certainly wasn't going to let them believe any differently.
That's awesome. So what happens next?
Well, there's not a lot. I mean, for me, there was not a lot of opportunity in Granite Falls, Washington. I have a lot of friends that still live there, great friends, and they've made great lives for themselves. There was nothing but bad influence for me there, at home and all around me. I was it's very easy to assume that I could have ended up in prison or dead or both. I mean, we're all going to die someday, but prematurely dead or dead in prison or some combination of all that. So I was just like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to get a girlfriend here and get stuck here. I don't want to get hooked on drugs here, which would be a very, very reasonable option to assume for me and a lot of my friends, and certainly my family. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. I was not the most confident kid. And so I wasn't going to move to Seattle. It was only an hour away, but then it's like an hour and a half now, maybe 2, the traffic. But I joined the Marine Corps, which is crazy for a long-haired kid to do. And it was great. It was great for me. I did a lot of destructive stuff, self-destructive stuff while I was there, but it was good for me. It was good for my confidence. And when I left the Marine Corps, I went to Seattle and jumped in head first. And
so tell us a little bit about that.
I had a friend who was one of my closest neighbor friend, my buddy Jeremy. He had moved to the city, had a job at a cemetery. And my first job when I got out of the Marine Corps was digging graves. I was a grave digger and a groundskeeper. And I got fired from that job for showing up to work with bright red, fire engine red hair. They were like, you can't.
Upset the client.
They were just like, you can't look like that here. I was like, well, why not? Everyone's dead, What's the problem? But I suppose I can see it now. But I had a hat on most of the time anyway, so it does. I got fired and did some construction work with my uncle Chris, the drummer with the missing finger, and for the summer until I could figure out what I was going to do. And then I got a job at the Pike Place Market and sort of got embedded downtown. And it's a whole other world down there in the Pike Place Market in Seattle. It's crazy. I met a lot of people. I met Steve Vai there. And at that point, I had found a band to play with. I convinced these guys that I was a bass player because no one would have me as a guitar player. No one wanted a guy with a shaved head and, whatever. They weren't having me. I wanted to be in Helmet or Tool or something, and everyone was trying to be not very good. And they were too punk rock for me or whatever. I had to learn punk rock, the hard way. So, yeah, convinced these guys that I could play bass. I saw this band play and I thought they were good. And I just was so excited to be able to talk to people that had a band, So I was talking to them after their show, like, wow, you guys are really good. How's this work? They're like, well, we're bummed our bass player's leaving. And I was like, well, I play bass, lie. And I didn't even have a bass. I didn't know what a bass did really,
Awesome.
So I borrowed a bass. They gave me a demo tape. I borrowed a bass from my brother-in-law and they said, learn these 2 songs. It was a 5-song cassette. I learned all 5 songs and I showed up to play with them, and they were surprised and happy that I learned all 5 of the songs, and they were like, all right, you're in. And that became the template by which I sort of chased down everything I've ever done. No one's ever invited me to join their band. I've just worn them down.
Yeah. And so did that band have any longevity?
Well, no. And there was there eventually Joe, our singer, he died. But it was it was a great band to be in. Joe also was was a sweet guy, was a troubled guy. But I wanted to do other stuff, It was it wasn't a jam band, and sometimes we did some rock, like heavy rock, but it was like, it didn't completely fulfill me. So I wanted to be able to do other things, and that was a problem. And I got a talking to, and I was like, look, I'm not in the Marine Corps. I'm done getting talkings to. Like, that's not how this works. That's not how life works for me anymore, for better or worse. So, yeah, so I quit. I was like, all right, well, I can't, I'm not doing an exclusivity with you. Like, that's it. So I had this crazy idea that if I hadn't made it by the time I was 25, that I was too old. I didn't show up until I was 21. So I played with a couple other bands, and then I quit.
Quit music?
Yeah, I had set a goal. I failed to reach that goal, and I told myself that was what I was going to do, and I did it. That's kind of how I work.
Well, thank you for being on the show. No. That was a good story.
All right, see you guys.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. So what's the next part that happens after you
I go
give
to
up?
community college for 3 weeks. For whatever reason, I had this lapse in my thought process where I was like, I'm not a school person. So I quit and I go back to school, right? And I hate it. I hate it. I'm, at that point, I'm 25. Even though there are a couple people that are older than me, I already feel too old to be there. I don't know that I would feel that way now, but I still don't think that I'm a good candidate for classroom learning. And after 3 weeks, I was like, all right, it's time for me to step on the gas pedal again. And so I started booking / managing a band, which was ridiculous because I didn't know anything about that. I was just like, I mean, I can call people, as well as anyone. And I have a lot more time to do it now that I'm not going to school. And I had a coffee shop job and, made good tips, and it was great. So I started doing that, and they were going to make a record. And then they were like, do you want to join the band? Maybe that was the first band that actually invited me. And I said, absolutely, as a guitar player. I hadn't played guitar in, 5-6 years at that point.
Wow.
And playing the bass was probably the best thing I ever did for my guitar playing. So I joined this band. It was called Nevada Bachelors. We made 2 records. When we recorded that first record, I'd been playing the guitar again for maybe 2 months. And I had written my parts for all the songs. And there's some stuff on there that I'm still really proud of, and that I don't think that I would be able to write now that I've been playing more regularly and have, all these other ideas and all of this other different vocabulary, right? So made a couple records with those guys. That band dissolved. I invited myself in to be in Harvey Danger, this band that had a big hit in the 90s. They made a second record, and I knew the guy that was producing their records. And I saw him.
If you would share for the listeners how one invites themselves into a band.
Well, yeah. It's a fine art. I mean, you gotta find out what's going on. Because if there's already someone holding down that position, it's just a moot point, right? You don't invite yourself in to sit on their lap. I mean, maybe you do, but I don't. I'm big. I'll crush their legs. So John had told me, yeah, we made the second Harvey Danger record. And I played a bunch of guitar on the record. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Are you going to join the band? And he's like, no, but I'm playing a couple shows with them, and they need someone to, fill my spot when they go on tour, because I'm not going to do that. And I said, I know a guy. Right? I know a guy. And so he's like, oh, interesting. And so I just started, our bands had played together, Harvey Danger and Nevada Bachelors. And I did it. I played a couple shows with Sean, the singer, just playing guitar with him. And then I just maybe drunkenly cornered him, like, hey, if you need a guy, I'm your guy. I'll leave right now. I could learn your songs in 2 days and 1-2 skidoo. Let's go. And I'm sure that they laughed and yeah, sure. But I got the call, and then that was it. It was on,
So far, did which was a better experience for you, the Nevada Bachelors or the Harvey Danger experience at that point?
They're completely different, because I was more a part. I was a member of the band of Nevada Bachelors, and I contributed some music and wrote all my parts, and it operated, generally democratically. Rob was the main guitar singing songwriter, but you know, we were a band. And Harvey Danger, like, I worked for them. It was insanely liberating. Like, I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to worry about how many shirts we sold. I didn't have to worry about how many tickets we sold when we went on tour, or how the record was doing. I didn't have to go up, you know, when we pull into whatever town and those guys have to go off and do a radio interview. I was like, I'm going to go check out the local record stores, you know? It was amazing. And I had convinced those guys that my friend John Roderick was totally a killer keyboard player. Yeah, he's great. And he joined the band shortly after I did. And those guys would go off and do their thing. And John and I would go on these crazy adventures in all these towns. It was great. I loved it. And I would love to do that again. I would love to do that way more than I would love to have my own band again, right at this point.
So it's interesting because earlier on when you were talking about your first band, you mentioned that it wasn't fulfilling. So my assumption is at this point it's feeling more fulfilling.
Well, it wasn't fulfilling because stylistically, you know, it was a little more subdued. It was a little more heady, and it was you know, I wanted to just be able to bash it out. There's no greater feeling than just the enveloping sound on a stage. Like, you know, a stage, it vibrates, you know, not like an earthquake, but sound, you know, they're called sound waves. It moves you in ways that you feel, but there's just no greater feeling than being in front of a cranked up two cranked up half stacks. It's just the best feeling. I would take it over any other, you know, hedonistic indulgence in the world.
So how long does that feeling last? Does it
last longer than crack?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not like, it's a common story. Like, musicians go on tour, you spend all your time traveling, you sit on your ass for 23 hours to do what you love to do for 1 hour. And that leaves a lot of time for monkey business. Right?
Sure.
So, I mean, the feeling, it lasts a while. I mean, when you play your first big show and you're like, whoa, they know the songs, or at least they know the song. You know, it's a great feeling. And if you've been playing for, I mean, I remember the first time I played in front of people in Seattle, it was, you know, a couple hundred people at an outdoor thing. And I was so nervous. And then, you know, after that, it was always 15 people, 25 people, Tuesday night, maybe, you know, whatever. You just keep going, maybe get some breaks, get in some different bands, you know, get your feet wet, play in front of bigger crowds. Now I don't even get nervous. Like, I'm almost more nervous after the show, because to touch back on the 23 hours, you know, like, I'm sober now. And you know, those 23 hours are scary if you have some addiction stuff built into you, you know. If it's so I'm almost more nervous after the show, not because I think I'm gonna like drink or use drugs, because a lot of people will chase that dragon. They'll go for drinking and drugging because, like, you just got off this amazing rush, like, now what? It's,
sure.
You know, you have to learn to go back to the bus and pour emergency into a bottle of water and pound that and then have some tea and read a book. Like, that is not the natural inclination of a touring rock musician.
For sure. It seems like that, as you mentioned, it would be such a letdown to go from that energy to that solo experience. So,
I mean, not anymore. I mean, the thing now is, if I work towards something, then it happens. I don't let whatever, the wake of that could potentially tailspin into depression, which is what would fuel anything like that, any bad behavior. Um, I don't sit on my hands waiting for that feeling to capture me. I'm like, all right, well, let's get up and get on with it, and let's go. What's next?
and speaking of what's next, how that Harvey Danger gig listed roughly a year and a half.
Yeah, and it was great. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was just like, and I was on top of the world. I mean, I was getting a salary. It wasn't a lot, but for me, it was the most money I'd ever made. And I don't even mind telling you how much it was. $500 a week for a musician in 2000. That was a lot of cake for me. Plus per diem, I never went out to a restaurant or did anything, and you got fed everywhere you went. Steal the salami plate, make sandwiches on the bus. Like, I was as happy as a pig in shit.
Sure, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so what's the next thing that happens?
Within 3 months, on my birthday in 2000, the year 2000, so 20 years ago, on my birthday, I tried out for a band called Alien Crime Syndicate, which a couple of my friends, like guys that, my bands had played with them before, and I knew a couple of the guys in the band. And same thing, they were like, learn a couple songs or whatever. And they tried a bunch of people out, but I think people would come down and they'd say like, oh, I'm a big fan or whatever. They told me, oh yeah, every person that's been down here is a big fan. Teach me your songs when I come into audition. But I had learned all the songs, and there was a lot of, if you listen to the music, it seems not very nuanced, but in the rhythmic sense, there were a lot of accents and pushes and pulls, and I'd learned all of them because I thought that's important shit. That's like, it's a part of the song. Like, it's a very important part of the song. And I learned it all. Like, I could have played a show with them the first time I walked in a room, and they were like, great, you're in. And within a few months, I also joined Loaded. So for a minute, I was in all three bands, and I felt like, unstoppable.
So you can't gloss over how you ended up in Loaded.
Pretty much the same way I've ended up in every band. Like, the way I ended up at Alien Crime Syndicate was Nabil owned this record store. And Nabil now runs 4AD America, and writes for the New York Times, but back then he played in rock bands in Seattle and owned a record store. And I just would punish these guys. I would just show up at my lunch break from my job and just never go back to work and just hang out, just linger. And he told me that they needed a guitar player, and I said, what about me? And he kind of laughed. And I was like, well, fuck you, man. No, seriously, what about me? And he said, really? Yeah, really. Like, I don't know why everyone thinks I'm joking when I say, well, what about me? Maybe because I'm always joking, but I'm not like, I don't joke. Like, if I'm like, hey, I'll join your band, I'm not joking. So yeah, that was it. I went down, did it. I heard that Duff was making a record. I had met him before through the Presidents of the United States of America, that band from Seattle. And he was making a record with this guy, Martin Favier, who made the second Nevada Bachelors record. And we had maintained friendship and still do. And I heard that they were making a record. They had tried a bunch of guitar players out. No one was really doing it. They didn't, a lot of people in Seattle at that time didn't learn to play guitar from listening to Aerosmith and the Sex Pistols, and for that matter, like the shred guys. They heard Nirvana and they were like, I don't have to do that shit. I can just learn a bar chord, write a song that's halfway good, and if I have a great band, then I'm going to be famous or whatever. That was the attitude of a lot of people. And sure it works, but not worked for those guys. But they wrote amazing songs, So I said, what about me? And, I think I had to say, what about me 3 times till I finally got the chance to go in. Thank God Duff wasn't there, because I'd have been really nervous, I was a huge Guns N' Roses fan. So they had a couple songs that they wanted some guitar playing on. I went in one night with Martin. It was just me and Martin, and we always worked really well together. And I knocked out some guitar stuff for these 2 songs, and Duff called me the next day or 2 days later. And it was like the classic thing where you're hello, and then he's like, hey, it's Duff, and you're like, whatever, fuck off, Steve, and there you go. Duff was like, I really liked what you put on the record. I haven't heard anyone around here play guitar like that. I love it. Would you be interested to come down and play with the band and see how it works? And I was like, yes. So, boom. No.
And so how long did membership in all 3 last?
Harvey Danger sort of like imploded for a moment, and it was a drag, but I was so excited about everything that was going on. And for a while I was in the other 2 bands. Loaded wasn't super active, Duff was going to school, and we went to Japan a couple times, went to LA a few times. And I've all of the most amazing things that I've done in my music career, I've gotten to do with that group of fellas. And eventually the bass player from Alien Crime Syndicate, Jeff Rouse, joined Loaded like shortly after I did. And I'm going to talk to him later tonight for my podcast.
Nice.
So we did that like that. Alien Crime Syndicate ended up getting a record deal, and Jeff and I had to sort of figure out what we were going to do. So we had to say, we need to focus on this because there's an opportunity, and Loaded isn't really, it's not going for it. And as it turned out, Velvet Revolver was on the verge of happening. Mm-hmm. So the timing was fine. Dave Kushner came in and played guitar and ended up in Velvet Revolver. And we did our thing. We made a record, toured around a bunch. Had a mostly disappointing. We had a lot of fun experiences, had some great tours, some amazing shows, but mostly I got really drunk and disillusioned, and I quit.
So what year is this that you quit?
Probably 2003, I think. Yeah, probably 2003.
What made you disillusioned?
Well, that was I guess I'd heard from all these people like about the experience of getting a record deal, and I was just so excited, but mostly I was naive, like it was going to happen for us. The golden path was laid out in front of us, and we were going to kick the gates open, and it just doesn't happen that way. And probably I wasn't, then I wasn't mature enough to just sit back, let what was happening happen. And yeah, I wasn't mature enough to let go of the things that I wasn't in control of, which is everything, So it was really frustrating for me. And it was some of the darkest times of my life, for sure. Especially at the end. And any of those guys in that band will tell you the same thing, I'm probably lucky to have gotten through that time alive.
Sure. And then the band reconvenes first around 06, Loaded, or
Yeah,
05.
I quit Alien Crime Syndicate, moved to Portland, and I worked down there for a little while, and then I come back to Seattle, moved back. I played in John Roderick's band for a tour. The guy that was in Harvey Danger with me, he has a band called The Long Winters, and I went out with him, made half a record with him, and then quit that. Mostly because of our relationship and dynamic. We're great friends. Sometimes it's not great to work for your friends. But again, I probably also, neither of us, but I can only take responsible for my own part, was definitely not mature enough to recognize what I needed to do at that time. So I was just like, later,
You're not the first artist that we've interviewed that talked about chasing the dream of getting signed or a successful career that actually liked it less after they achieved.
Well, there are there are so many fewer freedoms. The crazy thing about, and what the fuck do I know? I'm old and in the way at this point, but the way you can do things now is, I think, better than it used to be. And I think it's too bad that Spotify and other streaming services can't distribute the money that they have coming in a more, socialist manner. But the truth of the matter is, that's not even how America is set up. Like, if you want to tear Spotify down, like, start in your own backyard. I mean, I'm not here to get on a socialist platform and blow my horn, but Spotify is America, man. You're bummed that Metallica has 2 billion spins and they get all the money and you have 20,000 and you don't get any. You're an independent business owner. You're a small business owner. That's how America works, unfortunately. But there are things that you can do that Metallica can't do. Fuck, Metallica can't do a lot of stuff. Metallica can't make a Couch Riffs video, not as well as Couch Riffs can. And I don't feel weird about saying that.
Sure. I want to dive into how you make those for sure.
Yeah.
But before, I want to go back to the timeline real quick. And so so we're around 06, 07.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. I think Velvet Revolver was kind of starting to taper off. And I had always been in contact with Duff, and I'd see him when he came through town, and still I talk to him, a few times a week, just about random shit, Seahawks, whatever. And he just started kind of like throwing the idea about doing the band. Like, I think we played a benefit That's always the benefit show that gets bands, in a room together again. And they're like, oh man, this is fun. Let's do this. We had some leftover songs that we never recorded. And he said, well, let's record an EP. And so I would drive up from Portland and drive back and practice up there with the guys. And then we just did it. We got a record deal, went on tour. We made the EP, went to the UK and toured, came back. Trying to think if then we went to Japan and played a festival, came back, made a record, and then just went for it. And then it was like that for the next, from 2008 to 2012. So a good 4 years of just going. And it was great. I mean, I played with so many of my idols on the same stages or ate next to them in catering or whatever,
So tell us what that was like, meeting some of your idols.
I mean, I had a few experiences over the years that were disappointing because that 23 hours can put different people in different states of mind. And if you hold an admiration for someone and they're all fucked up, well, you're liable to have a bad experience, or if they're, who knows? So I always, and to this day now, if I'm around someone that I admire, like, unless I'm talking to them in a podcast, I won't say so. I'm certainly not gonna. I might not even talk to them at all, just because why would I want to ruin it?
I learned that very quickly. Sometimes it's better than one expects, and sometimes it's kind of ends your admiration, or it can end one's admiration for somebody.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, you bet. But it was great. We got to do a lot of amazing stuff. Toured with Motorhead,
Wow. So did you meet Lemmy?
Yeah, and still in contact with Phil.
Wow.
Yeah, we did a lot of great, like I said, all the biggest stuff I did with that band.
I want to ask specifically about the documentary concert film.
Yeah.
Tell us your experience with that. It's So Easy and Other Lies.
Here's the thing. We would have this habit, good or bad, of everyone would get all coffeeed up in the morning and then call each other with all these terrible ideas. And when the Taking record came out, Duff had this idea that I thought was terrible. But he was all coffeeed up and he's like, we're going to make a movie, but it's going to be broken up episodically. And there will be we're going to record a music video for every single song. And when you string them together, it's going to tell a story and it's going to be great. But there were just a lot of stuff and that thing got greenlit. And there was a lot about making that was really fun, but it was also pretty like we didn't have nobody wrote a script. There was no one hard directing anything. And in the end, it got finished after a lot of, and some craziness, legal stuff. It got finished, but wasn't really what anyone had envisioned originally, So we just kind of moved on from that. And then later, Duff while we were on tour, had been writing a book, and I still have like a photocopy first draft of it with an alternate title. I pulled it out, took a picture of it, sent it to him the other day, and he was like, is that what I called it back then? But we were on tour and we came home from tour and he was all coffeeed up and he was like, I have an idea. for a movie. And I was like, I'm out. And the first show, oh no, it wasn't a movie. It was a show. Yeah, so it was just a show with a slideshow and the music, and conceptually it was what the movie was. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like I just didn't feel great about higher cons. I didn't feel great about incorporating art into our thing. And so I sat out, and Jeff Fielder did the first show. But I attended. I went, because they're my friends. I was just like, and it was incredible. It was so cool. But then we were going to do a couple shows, similar to that on tour, like whatever. Sometimes we'd do 2 nights. We'd do a book show, and then we do a rock show, or we do one in front of the other, whatever. And so I started doing the show in lieu of Jeff. And then when the film concept started coming together, where it was just like, well, this is how the show is, just on a bigger stage. That's exactly the show. Well, I mean, we didn't have a string section, but we had done it a bunch of times. We did have the pedal steel, because Paul, the pedal steel player, was our tech, so in the film, Jeff came back, and thank God, because he's amazing, and I'm me.
I thought you were great as well. And so I'm sure you want to talk about your podcast. How did that come about?
Like I mentioned, I never wanted a podcast. It had been suggested to me a couple times by people who I don't know if I trusted their opinion or not. They're like, you sure like to talk. You should have a podcast. And I was like, I don't think so. Sounds like a terrible idea. And, but I moved to New York in 2015 after I got married. And I was in Brooklyn. I was working for a coffee company. I was working on making this record with this Scaldesia. The record came out. It's called The Union Gospel. We played a couple shows around town. And this coffee company that I was working for got into some trouble. There were 3 owners. One of the owners got into some Me Too trouble. And it absolutely devastated the business. And it was not a New York company. It was a San Francisco company. So they lost all of their wholesale customers. So yeah, I was a salesperson, and I lost all of my accounts. Everyone did. I mean, there's still, no salespeople there. This company survived, and now I'm one of their biggest customers, actually. But I was unemployed in New York with a $3,500 a month rent. I had unemployment coming in. I explored a few options, like, what am I going to do? But in that period of time, I applied for a job to work for Line 6, which is like a tech-based guitar effects company. They make guitar gadgets, professional and hobbyist level. And I thought that I could for sure get this job. I was like, this would be great. I had worked a little bit selling guitars. I had some experience, good talker or talker. I don't know if good or not, but they said, we love your resume. And I was like, well, of course, like, let's go. Send me checks. And they said, hey, can you make a couple of videos of you playing one of our products? It doesn't have to be professionally shot. It doesn't have to look great. We just have to know that you can play, and maybe talk about talk about it or whatever. And at this point, I'd been unemployed for 2 or 3 months, right? And so it didn't make any sense. I was just like, oh yeah, sure. And I did the video and I sent it to them. And I didn't hear from them for a week. I was like, well, let's see. 2 weeks went by and I emailed the human resources and they were like, well, maybe give it a little more time. And then I was like, this is getting weird. It's been a month and I'm not out on sales calls yet. And I went and looked at the video and I was like in sweatpants without shoes or socks on. I might have had socks on, but unshowered, unshaven. I took a shower before I did the podcast here, at least. I looked like I just crawled out from underneath a pile of newspapers. And I was like, oh, right. It's a big corporate fancy company, And I showed my wife and she was just like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. I just thought that I had the gig. And she's like, it sounds great though. And I used the GoPro or whatever. She's like, you should post that. So I posted it and people liked it more than they liked my other stuff. And I don't, how much people like my stuff, in that regard, that doesn't hold a lot of water for me. I don't put value in myself based on that. But I was like, maybe I'll do it again. And so I made a couple more. And then I was like, I wonder how I can make these sound better. And then I started trying and I realized, oh, if I actually try, I could make something interesting and cool. And started with me sitting on the couch in front of my record collection that was behind me, playing along to a record actually playing. And it sounded terrible. So then I figured out how to get an MP3 and play along to that. But then I started getting dinged for copyright infringement. Mm-hmm. And eventually I started doing complete covers. Like I would record all the parts, And then I started having guests. I was like, I wonder what would happen if I got a guest to sit on the couch with me. And Duff was coming through town on tour and he took the subway over. I think he took the subway to my place and came up and that, that video still sits up on my YouTube. And then I had Matt Sweeney. Duff introduced me to Matt Sweeney, who does a thing called Guitar Moves and has also had a storied studio and touring career and bands of his own. And he's an incredible musician. And then it just kind of snowballed. And that was the model. But I was always thinking, how do I keep this simple? Because again, what the fuck do I know? Like, really, I don't know anything. But I'm like, I think that people appreciate that I'm sitting on a couch and I'm clearly really playing and I'm not, because I would leave it would all, that's the other thing. It was always the first take. So I'd have someone over, we'd learn the bit, learn how we interacted and played along to the backing track. And then we push record and whatever happened. Thankfully, there were no real train wrecks, But I moved upstate 2 years ago and that put a hamper on everything. Well, upstate, I moved to the Hudson Valley. That people love to call the Hudson Valley upstate, but
upstate versus downstate. Yeah.
It's not upstate. I'm in the Hudson Valley now. And so it's, I'm like 2 hours away from anyone. And I tried to do it for a while. I was renting Airbnbs and it would cost me $250 to shoot an episode that, there was there was no way that that would ever make money because it's copyright material. And making money is not my end goal, but continuing to do it is. And if I spend all my money on Airbnbs in places that I don't sleep or live, well, that's going to put an end to the whole thing very quickly.
Sure.
So that's when I started doing the podcast, because it's something that I could do remotely. And so about this time last year, I actually started to try. You know, I was like, I wonder what would happen if I actually tried. We could probably look back at the published dates, but in maybe around November, I was like, I should try and put one out every week. I should really try to do it. Because at that point, I was doing one every 2-3 weeks. Just like, I'll just do it whenever. And then I was like, no, I'm going to push. I have a goal. I have a real goal. Because first 3 months, I was getting, 50 or 60 streams. And I was like, well, that's cool. 50 or 60 people listen to me talk to someone for fucking 2 hours. Jeez, what's wrong with them? Man, those guys need some more shit to do. And I reached my goal for the calendar year, which was a modest goal, but it was almost 3 times the amount of streams that I had at the time that I made the goal. And so New Year's Day 2020 came, and I was like, I'd like to triple that this year in 2020. And I think that's totally achievable. I just have to keep trying. And I am going to quintuple.
Wow.
Pretty good. That's times 5 for everyone from Granite Falls.
That's an amazing podcast.
It's okay. Somehow I'm able to keep getting people to come talk to me, which is great. And I made a wish list when I started doing it. Before I just even, I made a wish list before I even had committed myself to actually trying. I don't know what was going on in my head where I thought, well, I could probably make this happen, but I didn't try to make it happen. And so it never did, but I had Nels Klein on that list. And last month I got Nels Klein on the podcast with the good help of the Fretboard Journal. They introduced me. So I, it's not like I was like texted him and said, hey, bro. But if you don't burn people and you try hard and you're not a dick, and I talk about the golden rule a lot, every episode. I really think that if people pester you, or you're not interested in whatever someone's peddling you, like I get like spam sales things, like, hey, try this service, this shitty service that you don't need. And I respond to them and I say, hey, I appreciate you reaching out. I'm all set. Thanks. I mean, once a week I get a message from a t-shirt printer, and they keep, you're on some kind of a mailing list. I don't know who sells this shit, but someone sold my address a long time ago. So, but this is someone's job, and I don't want to keep getting these emails. So it takes me 10 seconds to say, hey man, thank you so much for reaching out. Probably this is the salesperson in me, like the considerate salesperson. Like, man, if only someone had done this for me, I'd have not wasted so much time trying to chase someone down and say, what about me? If someone says, thank you, but no thank you, I'm not interested, I have something I'm happy with, then everyone can move on, and you've treated them the way you want to be treated.
Good way to think about it.
I don't know if that's just the way I think.
I do have a question about you have a pretty rapid pace of releasing your episodes. That's, as a fellow producer, that stresses me out. Do you ever feel like you're up against the clock?
Look, man, so this will be fun. This is going to be fun, and this is going to fuck you up. 2020 has fucked a lot of people up, right? So I was doing, there were a couple weeks that I released 3 episodes at the end of 2019 in pursuit of reaching the goal that I wanted.
Okay.
And then I quickly realized that's too much. I'm just going to do 2, which is a lot. So
sure.
I've done 2 episodes a week all year, save a couple of weeks. If there was a holiday or if there was like something like an event where I was like, hey, I'm not going to do an episode this week because there's this, I'm still sorting a lot of things out. Like, how am I going to release the performance videos and blah, blah, blah. So 2020 comes along and changes everything, right? Like, I can't sit on a couch with someone except for my dogs and my wife. And like half the time, they don't want to sit on the couch with my dogs. Always want to be on the couch, but they don't get to be on the couch. So I see Charlie Benante and Alex Skolnick and some other folks do a Rush song. I see this video, and it looks like a Zoom call, and they're all playing at the same time, and I'm like, this is fucking awesome. And this is the future. Like, this is it. And it was a lightning bolt moment. And I thought, 2 years ago, I did a video like this with Jeff Rouse in preparation for a benefit show that we played then, a Loaded show. And basically, we both played along to an MP3 of one of our songs. And then I just cut it together and did it on a split screen, put it out. You can find it on somewhere, I don't know. And so I had done something like this before, but it never occurred to me to do it with a whole band, because I had this idea in my mind that, I wanted to do like a show. Like, I wanted to, wanted to do like a late night show kind of a thing, but on a couch. So I see this video, and Alex and I have been friendly since he was on Couchris early on. And I just texted him, I was like, how do you do that? And he told me, and I was like, well, that's what I thought. But then I thought that sounded crazy. And I thought, I should, when I have some time, I'm going to figure out how to do this. Right about that time, the shutdown happened. Like, everything, the shit just hit the fan. My salary got cut 50%. Like a lot of people. I mean, and the unemployment thing, like all this stimulus and all this other stuff that people were stoked about, because there were a lot of people that were stoked to get unemployment and a stimulus extra, like, I know people that made more money this year than they ever did working. Well, the poor kid in me was like, there was no talk of, when my salary got cut, there was no talk of, here's another $600 a week for you, for people who are hit by this stuff. I didn't waste any time. I got a job. I got an entry-level job at UPS loading semi-truck tractor trailers for what was supposed to be part-time in the evening, but it was so busy because everything was being shipped. It was a second full-time job. So for 2 months, I worked 16 hours a day, commuted 3.5 hours a day, and slept 4 hours a night. Because I thought that I had to, you know. Like I said, there was no talk of the stimulus stuff. I couldn't wait around for that. My wife and I just bought this house up here. Like, I wasn't interested in putting us in a position where this was going to go away, or tax savings. Or like, I just did it. And during that time, I was so stubborn and so driven, but also probably a little angry. I continued to do 2 podcasts a week. I never missed. I started a second fucking podcast. So I started a second podcast and produced the first 2, quarantine videos, like that I've done.
Wow.
It was a brutal time. Eventually, I started to doze off at the wheel between jobs, and within a week of that time, my salary came back, and I left the UPS job.
Well, Lauren, we need to up our game.
Seriously. I'm feeling very unproductive.
Here's the thing. So when the UPS job went away and I went back to just working full time, I had so much energy. And I had so much time that I started 6 videos. They still haven't all come out because I don't know if you know this, but musicians aren't the easiest folks to organize.
I have a suspicion.
Yeah. So some of these have, 5 months to get a video finished. It's crazy. Some of them come together much faster, but never quicker than 6 weeks, ever. No way. Every musician says, "Oh, I'll get this to you after the weekend, like by Tuesday." But really what they mean, Tuesday in 2 weeks. So however many people you have in one of these videos, it takes 3 weeks.
Wow.
So what's the motivation behind doing these videos? Is it to stay in music? Is it to, you mentioned kind of seeing it as like the future of music? What's the motivation behind it?
Well, hopefully it's not the future of music. Hopefully the future of music is that people get in rooms together and they get to enjoy playing music together, and one person hits a chord and the sound waves go through everyone, and someone hits a drum and those sound waves go through everyone, and it's a fucking love fest. But until that happens, I had always had this idea that I want the songs that I have picked, I've tried to encourage people to do songs that people wouldn't expect to see them do, right? And as the gears started turning, I was like, well, what if I actually put together bands that were also unexpected, and the 2020 has given an opportunity for me to actually do that. It's not the same, but it's interesting and fun and entertaining for people. So I don't know how many I've done, a half a dozen now. Not nearly as many as I thought I would have, because of the nature of I still work full time. I'm still doing the podcast, and it's still just me with someone, my buddy Don Gunn, mixing the audio. Thankfully, but the best part about all of it is that I got asked by this organization in Seattle called Smooch to make an all-star Seattle video for a fundraiser event that helps fund uncompensated health care at Seattle Children's Hospital. And, I was like, yes, absolutely, 110%. And I put that together, and it premiered last night on KEXP's YouTube channel. And it was a great experience. Super, super fun. It kind of rang a bell for me. It was like, you know what? This is amazing. I cannot wait for the opportunity to use whatever platform I have to help people that need help more than I do again. So I don't know if anyone is listening and they're organizing something, hit me up. I might be interested in putting something together to help you.
And for this particular event, you had the lead singer from Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah, Ben Gibbard. Yeah, the band was amazing. The band was the drummer is in Death Cab, Jason McGurr. The bass player is Nate Mendel of the Foo Fighters and previously of Sunny Day Real Estate. Two other guitar players besides me, Dave Depper from Death Cab and Ian Moore, who's a legend in his own right. He's a guy grew up in Austin and was very before he walked away and was like, I'm going to go be a songwriter and hone my craft that way. Like he was on the fast track to be, the next guy, the guy. He played guitar. Jeff Angel of the Walking Papers was on acoustic. And then we did the song Highwayman by the Highwaymen. And so I picked that song specifically because there's 4 singers. And I thought, why would I pick a song with 1 singer if I could get a song with 4 singers and raise maybe 4 times as much money? That was my logic. I had to convince some folks that it was a good idea, but turns out it was a great idea for once in my life. And so the verses were handled by Ben Gibbard of Death Cab, Duff, Isaac Brock of Modest Mouse, and Mark Lanigan.
Wow.
And the latter 2 guys, they don't pop up on the internet much. Like it was they were good catches, and both were like super enthusiastic about being able to contribute to the cause, which is amazing, a great cause.
That's a heck of a lineup.
It was great, man. But here's the thing, like there are a lot of people making videos like this, right? And they're almost all at least entertaining, and great and fun.
Sure.
The one thing that I stick to, and I've sent a lot of people back to the drawing board, and that's part of why these things take so long. Turns out musicians aren't great at following directions. To tie it back to like the first take thing that I was doing when I was on the couch with people, I make people do this in a single pass, and you film and record audio at the same time. So don't record a perfect, multi-tracked guitar part and then lip sync to it and send that to me, because I'm not going to use it. Like, get out of here with that shit. Everyone wants music. Everyone wants live music. And let's face it, the best music is tracked live. So the best I can do is to have everyone track live separately. right? So the music still has a little bit of a push and pull. It feels like a real performance because it is. We're just not in the room together. We're not even playing the song at the same time together, but everyone does it in a single pass live. Because I'm not trying to make shitty music videos. For all these songs, there's already great music videos, right? I'm trying to make performance videos.
I love those videos.
There's some great ones out there.
So what advice would you have for an aspiring musician?
Don't do drugs. Just say no. Say yes to music. Say no to drugs and drinking. Unless you have absolutely no history of drinking and drugging in your family, and as far as your family tree roots grow underground, where you don't even, they don't, they never been to a family reunion, just don't do it. It's that's number one. Number two, I would say practice, and don't practice alone if you can help it. Like right now, of course, we have to practice alone, right? Play with people. This is advice that I got, and that I mean, it's not hard for me to follow this advice, to be honest, but I was told, play with people that are better than you. And I still am doing it all the time. That's all I can do. Most people are better than me. So, you're going to learn that way, And lastly, don't burn any bridges. Don't forget. Someone told me this once, and I listened to them. All the people you meet on your way up, you're going to see them on your way back down. So you best treat them with respect, because they're likely to be right where you saw them last time. And, even if you just have a cross word for someone that they don't deserve, they're not going to forget that. What's the saying? Like, people aren't always going to remember what you say to them, but they're going to remember the way that you make them feel. I don't know. I don't think that as a young person, I burned many bridges. I was a pretty cocky young kid, but I think that's something that's worth putting in its practice. That's a good practice to have in your life.
To go with kind of a point you were just making there for a second, what are some things that you think you've learned about yourself over the years that you've been doing it, since picking it up as, the guitar up as an early kid?
That learned, like, about me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
That I have to play music. Like, I won't quit again. Maybe I'll have breaks until I figure out what is next. I've learned that I'm a lot more ambitious than I ever thought that I was. That might be a symptom of getting old and realize and seeing my mortality. I'm way more than halfway done with life, way more. I'll be 49 this month. That's way more than halfway done. And when I think about when I'm gone, I guess people will miss me, but when I think about, have I done everything that I wanted to do? Well, fuck no. Every day there's new stuff that I want to do. Like, so you have to, what I've realized is, like, as I've aged, I realize I'm more driven than ever. And stubborn. I know that I'm really stubborn.
That actually segues well into something I noticed you mentioned every band that you tried out for, you had most, if not all of their songs you were able to play them. So you
Yeah.
put the time in, but then when you said you were initially losing half your salary, you took the initiative and took that extra job and you attacked it full on. Have you always had that drive?
Um, about things that I care about. Yeah, I mean, if you look, you can't put on whether or not you care about something. You either do or you don't, and it will be evident. And I give a shit about having a roof over my head, and I care about my family staying warm and dry. You know, somehow miraculously, I worked really hard. I continued to grow my silly accidental podcast through 2020 while working 16 hours, a day, and commuting 3.5. It was like, when I look back on it, I have no idea how I did it. But the thing is, I didn't think I had a choice, you know, whether or not people would have been disappointed if the podcast disappeared didn't matter to me. Like, maybe some people would have missed it, and maybe but most people in the world, if you look at it in that way, like, how many people are on Earth? You guys are smart. You know that. I know you know the answer. Billions. How many people know what couch riffs is? It does, it just doesn't matter. It's not important. What's important is a lot of other stuff. So,
like Kansas said, we're dust in the wind. So
indeed. So, I don't know, man. Yeah, if you give a shit about something, prove it.
I like that.
Prove it. Because I'm not gonna. I lived enough life before I even graduated high school to know that a lot of people are full of hot air. And and I think that a lot of people, I spent a lot of time in my life full of hot air. And I have I'm basically just the king of following through on joke ideas, or bad ideas, even some of them.
Was there ever a moment when you were playing for some of these bands that you played for that mentally as you're playing, you're thinking, man, they're going to figure me out. I don't belong here.
That is a thing that you have to train yourself. There's a song by Funkadelic that I listen to once a month called Good Thoughts, Bad Thoughts. And it's, it's an incredible song, and the music is insane, but a lot of it makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, be careful what you think, because the seeds that you plant in your mind will grow, and you will rise to I'm paraphrasing some of this shit. You will rise to your greatest thought. You're basically, you can self-realize yourself. Come here, Rose, come on. So, if you think of yourself as something, you will be that. Not like, I think of myself as being the next fucking Steve Jobs or whatever. Well, that's maybe, but you're going to have to imagine more than just that. If you think you're going to sink to the lowest depths of your esteem. If you think you're a trash person, you will treat yourself like trash, and you will accept it when other people treat you that way. And it's a lot easier to say it than to practice it, because not a lot of people get what they deserve. And what do people deserve anyway? You know, it's funny. I had Matt Sweeney on the podcast, like I mentioned, and we got off on this topic. It's the most commented section of any podcast I've had. We talk about luck. And he said, I don't know, man. I just think I've been insanely lucky in my life. And I said, I don't know. I don't believe in luck. And man, that lit people up. And it really, like, it gets people fired up in a lot of ways, because it gets a lot of juice flowing, because people are like, all right, well, are you lucky because you're white? Well, I most certainly have white privilege. Absolutely. And if people don't agree, I don't give a fuck. It's true. That's true. A cop has never roughed me up for, like, I could spit on a cop and not get my ass beat. Probably. I'm not going to spit on a cop because, you know, I'm allergic to prison. But, you know, people get pretty fired up about that.
Sure.
I got off on a topic there. I got all excited, but people, yeah, luck and what do you deserve? Someone recently, I also see all the comments that people type in, you know, in their fury. Now you have, like, in Gmail, you can type a shitty email and click send, and they're like, "Are you sure?" And you can click the, all right, I take it back. But, you know, if someone comments on your video and then deletes it, I still get the message, you guys. Guess what? I still get the message. And, you know, a lot of people have, can I tell a funny story real quick?
Sure.
A few months ago, I woke up and I looked at my phone, the alarm goes off, and I look at my phone, and it's like, oh, there's some new comment on that exact topic of luck. And some guy said, you know, of course, the guy who has a storied career and has recorded on tens of platinum albums. You know, Matt Sweeney's played on Cat Stevens, Adele, fucking Glenn Campbell, you know, just all this incredible stuff. Believes in luck, and the shithead who, whatever, you know, like, had some, like, really horrible stuff to say about me, like, thinks that hard work is what gets you somewhere. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes some people do have to work harder than others. Some people can work hard their whole lives and not get anywhere. And so, I don't know, is that missing element luck? I don't know. But I wear glasses, right? And so I see who this guy is, and I look him up. I'm like, because he disappears his message. He erases it. And I see his name, and I'm like, I can't send him a message because I want to send him a message. I'm like, you know what? The guy's a professional magician, and it's 2020. I'm like, this guy's not performing. He's having a tough time. And he lashed out at me. So I'm going to send him a nice message. So I find him on Instagram. And I say, hey, man, I got your message on YouTube. I know you deleted it, but listen, I want you to know, I hope you're doing all right. And this is a shitty year for a lot of people, and I know you're a performer. And I hope that this year is not cruel to you, and I hope that you find a way to be happy, and I just hope you're okay. And he wrote me back and he goes, "Hey man, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about." And I messaged the wrong guy. I was like, it was like one of those like Aaron or Eric, you know, like with a C or a K or something. And so I just gave up. I was like, fuck. I messaged the wrong guy. He was like, "I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, dude." Yeah.
At least you tried to do a good deed.
Well, I was just like, why would this guy say such shitty things? Now, I understand what motivates people to think shitty things. I battle shitty thoughts all the time, but like, what compels a person to voice those things? And I think to myself, like, what am I going to do? Fight fire with fire and be like, "Kiss my ass. You suck. Look at you, man. You can't play a D minor."
Yeah.
You know, what, like, is that what I want to do? No, man. I want to just say, "Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Sure.
You doing okay? You all right?"
I like it. So what's the biggest takeaway from your story, Mike?
Just say yes. Figure out. I mean, you don't have to know what you want to do. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do. And it's almost better if you don't know exactly what you want to do, because you won't be disappointed by the adjustments you have to make along the way. You'll be able to accept them. You know, I thought life was going to be one thing. And I don't know that many people who thought their life was going to be exactly what it is. But, you know, I'm a little thicker than a lot of people. It took me some time to figure this stuff out. Just, yeah, be open to opportunities. Be kind to people. What did you ask me?
The takeaway from your life stories.
Yeah,
I think you nailed it.
I don't know. That's the takeaway, is like, be open to opportunities. And if the door is even cracked, take a look at what's going on the other side of the door. You know, I had like I talk about having this hick inferiority complex when I got to Seattle, you know. And, you know, I read books and stuff, and I wasn't a complete hick, but, you know, I knew where I came from, you know. And I thought that everyone that was in Seattle knew something that I didn't know. And I thought that there was some secret, there was like a secret handshake or something that I just was never going to learn. And there's not. Turns out. There's no secret handshake. Different people know different things, you know? And that's that. Like, the people that you think are so cool and amazing, you can teach them something. And if they're not open to learning it, I mean, that's their problem, not yours.
That's powerful.
It's the truth.
Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure. We appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. I don't know, I can't speak for Lauren, but I'm sure she enjoyed it as much as I did.
Absolutely.
Man, will you guys shut up?
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.